Alright. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number, 139. Today, we're finally going to get back to talking about RPG stuff. I needed to drink. So again, I've been doing this like random series on here where I talk about various kind of game design philosophies, I guess, and how they can affect tabletop RPGs. Just because the topic itself is fascinating to me, and the with the videos that I make, like with my new Essential Essence 20 series, understanding the kind of fundamental game design choices behind the things that they do can be really, really useful in me not only being able to kind of examine how to use certain features, but also when I make suggestions during these things of, hey, maybe you want to make this kind of change. So today, I wanted to talk about probably the biggest kind of line in the sand you can draw when it comes to classifying tabletop RPGs, and that is the idea of a skill-based RPG versus a class-based RPG. And just to clear anything up, I actually don't have a preference to either. I have a few different skill-based RPGs that I really, really enjoy. I have a few different class-based RPGs that I really, really enjoy. I don't think one is inherently better than the other. However, they do allow and they do kind of promote very different gameplay styles. And that's, again, to me, that's something that's really, really fascinating. So let's start off by saying, well, what is a skill-based RPG and what is a class-based RPG? And it's easier to start with class-based first. A class-based RPG is when you are building your character, you choose a class. And a class is generally going to be a collection of abilities grouped together to kind of fill in some sort of fantasy. So if we go to the most well-known RPG on the planet, and the one that most people think about when you just say, oh yeah, tabletop RPG. Oh, you mean D&D? Yeah. So D&D has been and probably will always be a class-based RPG. And so each class is designed to kind of feed into a particular kind of class fantasy is what they could call it. So like wizards are, the fantasies are you are these super powerful magical beings that can harness the elements and to, do amazing things like that. Whereas a barbarian is me big, me hit things, me get angry. And so the kind of benefit of a class-based RPG. Well, I guess let's get into benefits and drawbacks in a little bit. So that's effectively what a class-based RPG is. A skill-based RPG is, instead of having set classes, you'll have a bunch of different skills. And by investing some kind of limited currency, whether that's experience points, whether that's build points, or whether it's just every time you level up you can choose a skill from this list or whatever like that. And effectively, it allows you to kind of build your own class, to be honest. And so instead of having kind of a set group of, okay, well, if I want to be a fighter, so I'm going to get extra attack and I'm going to get action surge, and I'm going to get a fighting style. They would just have, well, action surge is over here and it costs this much, and extra attack is over here and it costs this much, and fighting styles are right here and they cost this much. So if you want to be that fighter, you definitely can. You just have to purchase those particular skills. But if you wanted, maybe you really like the fighting styles and the extra attack. But action surge, you never remember to use it, and so you'd like something a little bit more, simple. So you're going to take this ability over here, which just gives you additional damage when you have advantage on an attack roll, basically giving them a sneak attack. Well, now you have something a little bit different, and that's effectively what a skill-based RPG is. A lot of people will kind of misinterpret that. Oh, skill-based means you have to be skilled to play them. No, it just means that when you're creating your character, you are choosing skills instead of a class. So, the inherent benefits into the drawbacks. Again, I'm going to go with class-based first because that was my first RPG, tabletop RPG I ever played, was the Dragon Age RPG, and that is class-based. And then the one that I have spent the most amount of time playing has been Dungeons and Dragons. I started in 4th edition, which was super class-based. They had like 20 some odd different classes. It was super fun. And then I play a shit ton of 5th edition D&D, which is class-based. Specifically, it is subclass-based, because while they've only added one additional class in the decade that it has existed, they add more variety by just adding a shit ton of extra subclasses. So, the inherent benefit of a class-based RPG is the fact that, first of all, choice paralysis is not nearly as bad. If you've never heard the term, choice paralysis is basically when you give people too many choices and not enough ways to kind of narrow down their field of choices, or not enough ways to kind of weight the different choices so that they can make a decision. They'll have what's called choice paralysis, where they just have all these different things, they don't know what to choose, so they just sit there kind of, blue screening. So with a class-based RPG, you have less choice paralysis, depending on how many classes exist, because you're having a much smaller thing, and it's very easy to weight the various choices that you have. Well, do you want to be a martial-based class, or do you want to be a magic-based class? Well, I'd like to, I'd like to use a big greatsword. Okay, well, let's start looking at the martials then. Let's look at the weapon-based class. And how would you like to use that greatsword? Well, I think it'd be really cool is if I hit someone with my greatsword and I make them explode. Have you heard about have you heard the good word of our Lord and Savior Paladin? And it makes it very, very easy to kind of weight and measure different things for you to make a decision that feels like the right decision for you. Here's a fun fact that a lot of people don't understand. It's a business fact, but it's going to relate to this in just a second, I promise. Every single transaction that has ever happened on the planet is always someone transferring something of lesser value for something of greater value. And that is true on both sides. And a lot of people, when they hear that, they go, well, that doesn't make sense. What about, healthcare? Healthcare, I don't feel that the amount of money I'm giving my healthcare is worth my insurance company is worth what I'm getting. Well, it absolutely is, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't pay for it. See, you're mistaking that the thing that you're getting is insurance. No, the thing that you're getting is you get to live. And in your mind, that is more valuable than the money that you are giving away. Even when you feel like you are getting ripped off, you are still participating in a transaction where the thing that you're giving away is less valuable than the thing that you are getting. So yeah, that's. I think that was something I learned actually in business school, and it was one of those things that just kind of blew my mind, because again, my thought process is immediately, well, no, a lot of people, buy things that they think are overpriced. Yeah, but if they actually thought, it was less valuable than the money that they had, then they would have kept the money. You are mistaking the idea of feeling that something is overpriced with the idea that even if it's overpriced, I'm still going to get it because I value that item more than I value this money. So, relating this back to tabletop RPGs, when people make a choice in an RPG, it's the right choice in their mind. What I mean by that is, in an idea of like choice paralysis, eventually someone has to get to the point where they feel that they found the right answer. Even if it's just the right answer in this particular situation, they have to get to a feeling like I have made the right choice here. If they can't get to that point, they simply won't make the choice. They will find something else to choose, whether that means, not playing the game anymore, whether that means coming up with a weird, convoluted way to do it. But everybody always makes the right choice. And if they later find out it was the wrong choice, it infuriates them, because at that point, at one point they thought it was the right choice, and now they think it's the wrong choice. And depending on why it becomes the wrong choice later on, can lead to significant player dissatisfaction. If they feel like they made the wrong choice based on something that was completely impossible for them to know, then they're going to get really frustrated. However, if they find out later it was the wrong choice because of something that seems significantly more fair and measured and not just kind of random, then they go, well, it was the right choice then, it's the wrong choice now, and next time I can make the right choice that's going to remain the right choice. So, getting back to the idea of class-based RPGs and choice paralysis, the ability for you to weigh your options and find the right choice is really, really important, especially when you're talking about character creation. And that's one of the things that class-based RPGs have a lot of tools at their disposal to weight those choices. You have the things like the actual mechanics themselves. You can look at the mechanics and go, hey, these things synergize really well, and that's really cool. But then you also have lore attached to the classes. So if you're looking for a more kind of a power fantasy that's based around a particular style of character, the lore that's built around it is going to be another thing that can kind of weight it. Yeah, it's kind of cool to talk about how a ranger can pick a favored enemy, but if you start describing like Aragorn stalking his way through the wilderness when he comes upon a camp of orcs, and having hunted orcs for most of his life, he knows exactly what he needs to do. He takes an arrow from his quiver, fits it to his short bow, pulls it back, and as he exhales, he releases the arrow and goes for the single point, the single gap in the armor near the neck that he knows is vulnerable. That sounds really, really cool. And that means it's like, well, if I play a ranger, then I can do cool stuff like that. Well, definitely, that sounds amazing and fun and cool. So, when you're thinking about game design and things like that, the ability to create weight to different choices and convince players that this is the right choice. And again, I mentioned this before. In my personal opinion, good game design gives you choices, bad game design gives you right answers. I don't want to confuse people by saying that the idea here is to force players into making a particular choice because it is the right one. No. Giving the player enough, giving the player the ability to weight choices in their mind so that their choice is the right choice, but it's not the right choice for every single person that plays the game. That's what I mean when I say good game design gives you choices, bad game design gives you right answers. Every choice you make, however, as a player, should, at least in that moment, feel like the right choice. And there have been situations in games that I've played and games that I've run where the players get really, really frustrated because they can't make a right choice. Because they'll sit there and go, well, I don't know which one of these is the better option. And I've seen people get extremely frustrated because they're like, they don't like this idea of, well, I don't know. This is just random. I didn't want to play a random game. I'm supposed to be Aragorn, you know, son of Arathorn, you know, I'm supposed to be, you know, King of Gondor. The King of Gondor wouldn't be trying to figure out whether he's supposed to go on the left path or the right path. He would instantly know. Why is this so stupid? So, that is something that class-based games definitely have going for it. Another thing that class-based games have in their favor is in the idea of kind of balance to ensure that, again, the difference between giving players choices versus right answers. If there are certain combinations that are just inherently better than everything else, then anyone that makes the choice to use those is going to feel more special on the battlefield. They can do more things, they can do more powerful things, and anyone that doesn't make those choices feels less special. In a class-based RPG, by limiting things to having to go a certain number of levels in the class, that prevents certain abilities from kind of breaking the game. If you look at D&D 5th edition, there are quite a few 11th level abilities. Like when you go from 10th level to 11th level, the game changes massively. And one of the reasons for that is you can't have two 11th level abilities. Because the max level you can get to is 20, as soon as you hit level 11, those are exclusive to that class, and they cannot be combined with any other level 11 ability. And so you will see, generally right around level 11, you will see this huge jump in power. They even have it built into the system where going from level 10 to 11 actually takes more experience than going from level 11 to level 12. The reason being is you're going from tier 2 to tier 3, and again, those 11th level abilities are going to change things massively, whereas 12th level abilities, in general, aren't going to change a whole lot because it's either an ability score improvement or a feat. And any feats that you have access to at 12th level, you had access to at 8th level, you had access to at 4th level. So it's not that big a change, and it's probably not going to make as big an impact on your character as when you went to 11th level and got those 11th level abilities. And then as you go higher and higher and higher, the abilities just start getting more and more fantastical because you can't combine anything above 11th level with another ability from a different class of everything above 11th level. So that's something that a good class-based RPG is going to do. Once you get to the point, either if there's no multi-classing, then they can go really, really nuts with the crazy abilities that they give each class, because they don't have to worry about somebody combining this ability and coming up with something so broken that everyone else just stops having fun at the table. If you have multi-classing, then you still do have some control over being able to create some really interesting, unique abilities. You just have to ensure that you're keeping track of what other classes are doing around those levels. And then once you get to the point where abilities can't mix and match, then you can start going for nonsense stuff. Things like Paladins getting a transformation ability at level 20 is bonkers, but it's really cool bonkers. Paladins also at level 11 get additional damage every time they attack. So it can definitely massively change the game when every time you attack, instead of rolling one die, you're rolling two dice. And if you were to combine that with like the fighter who gets 3 attacks at level 11, well, going from 2 attacks to 3 attacks is not that big a deal. But going from 2 attacks to 3 attacks that also now do an additional die of damage each, that's a massive, massive change. So, so those are kind of the big benefits of a class-based RPG is you get rid of a little bit of the paralysis of choice. You have more ways to kind of weight the options in the player's eyes through things like lore associated with the class, and you have the ability to give them more interesting, unique abilities because you don't have to worry about those abilities being combined with other abilities depending on how multi-classing works or if it even exists in your setting. Now for the downside of class-based RPGs. Probably the one that is brought up the most is they're not as customizable, which isn't true 99% of the time, but there is a kernel of truth hidden in there, which is the idea that if you want to create a character completely unique to what the designers had in mind, you're going to have to know the system really, really well. I do this on a regular basis with Dungeons and Dragons. My last, the last character that I actually played in an actual game, was a card throwing gambler. And the way that I made them was I just took a Battlemaster fighter and took the throwing fighting style and a bunch of different things, and I turned it into a really, really interesting, just weird ass character. And then that campaign kind of died, and so now I have a new campaign that I've been playing. I think we've only had one session so far, but scheduling's hard, folks. Now I'm playing a two-handed ranger that took the druidic fighting style to get some druid cantrips, just because I wanted to. I've never seen anyone take that fighting style. It was an additional fighting style that was introduced in Tasha's. It's exclusive to rangers, and nobody ever takes it because it's really not built for. Druid cantrips are really not super useful for rangers. They need their extra attack to get their hunter's mark additional damage, and they're just not made for it. And so I made this really weird character that doesn't use Hunter's Mark, doesn't even know Hunter's Mark, and uses a cantrip with a wooden sword to do their damage, and then is also I can't remember the subclass, but the subclass that uses portals. And so most of their additional damage abilities are one time per round, so I'm not losing any damage by not using extra attack and just attacking with cantrips. So if you want to create a character that is completely unlike a character that the designers were intending to have in the game, you're going to have a harder time. Does that mean it's impossible? No, but a lot of times it requires a lot of reflavoring and really, really understanding the system pretty well. Another downside of class-based RPGs, as far as kind of playstyle is concerned, is class-based RPGs highly encourage everyone to pick different classes. And if you don't have enough classes that are similar but different, it can start creating problems. Like, again, bringing up 5th edition because it's a pretty good example for a lot of different things. Sorry, I had something on my glasses. In 5th edition, there are 3 different arcane full casters. You have wizards, you have sorcerers, and you have bards. Because of that, if you have someone that wants to play a spellcaster and they don't want to go the more kind of nature-based route of being a druid or the divine route of being a cleric, well, then you still have 3 other options. And each one plays very, very differently. So you can have a wizard and a sorcerer and a bard all on the same team, and each one is going to feel very different and going to feel like do different things. However, when we go the other route, if you want to be a holy, spellcaster, someone who kind of controls the god's fury through magic, you're a cleric. And that's really about it. And so if you have two different players that both want to play that class, through the use of subclasses, you can still, like, I've seen campaigns where they've had two different clerics that were that just chose two different subclasses, and they played very, very differently, and it was still super, super fun. But again, that requires the designers to add another source of differentiation. For 5th edition, they use subclasses. For other things, like for the Power Rangers RPG, they use a bunch of different feats effectively. They call them perks in the Essence 20 system, but in order to differentiate things. And specifically in the Power Rangers RPG, they specifically say in the book, according to the lore, you can't have two Rangers of the same color spectrum on the same team, and they tie their classes, they call them roles, to the color spectrum. So you can't have two Blue Rangers. Even if they both build their characters very differently from using their different perks and things like that, you're not allowed to do that. And so Essence 20, specifically Power Rangers, they don't do that in any other system. It's just Power Rangers. They have to specifically say, yes, you need to choose different classes. So yeah, in a class-based RPG, that is a big detriment. And it also means, from a design perspective, when you are creating your classes in a class-based RPG, you need to have enough variety in your classes that players are going to have enough choices that they can choose the thing they want. Again, every character is going to make the quote-unquote right choice. However, if the reason that it is the right choice is that they were the choice that they wanted to make was removed from them, that they weren't allowed to make the choice that they wanted, and so now they're given a smaller pool of choices to go from, and then they choose this one, they're always going to feel resentful, because while technically that was the right choice in that situation, they know that if something else had happened, there was a different choice that would have been the right choice if they had been allowed to make that choice. They simply just weren't allowed to make it. And that can become a very frustrating thing. So in the realm of game design, if you're creating a class-based game, you have to really understand, okay, the number of classes that we create is going to have to provide for a lot of different playstyles, obviously, but it's also going to have to provide for a lot of very similar playstyles that still feel different. When D&D 5th edition first launched, they had a minimum of 2 subclasses for every class. Most of them had at least 3. 2 of them had like 12 apiece. Clerics and wizards, I'm looking at you. So they decided to get around the idea of, well, we need to have enough similar play styles that are still different by using a subclass system, which is extremely common in class-based systems. If you look at the Dragon Age RPG, they actually have you choose your main class, and then when you get to, if I remember correctly, level 4 was the original version. When you got to level 4, you would choose a subclass, and that would give you additional skills that you could pick up for that. And then again at either level 8 or level 12, you could choose another subclass. So starting at level 1, I think there was only like 3 or 4 different classes you could choose from, but then once you get to level 4, each class would have 3 or 4 different subclasses you could choose from. And then again at level 8, you could choose another one from those, still just 4, but by combining 2 different ones and choosing other, you could create a lot of differences. It meant that in the beginning, if there were two people that both chose the mage route, they were going to feel kind of similar to each other. But as soon as that level 4 happened, they could make different choices and start doing cool things. Eventually, the age system, which is what Dragon Age was powered under, they released an updated version of the age system. And that one, they would allow you to choose your subclass effectively right at level 1, and then you'd get an additional choice at level 8. But it meant right from the beginning you'd have a little bit more customizability. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other kind of detriments to class-based. Like that's the big one, is the kind of limitation of choice. And then obviously the idea of multi-classing is something that you have to deal with in class-based RPG. Is, do you want to allow it? Do you not want to allow it? And then the rules for multi-classing. I made a whole video about multi-classing. The rules that you decide upon multi-classing is going to directly affect how people play the game. So yeah, so let's move over to skill-based RPGs. Let's talk about the advantages first. The first real big advantage is that quote-unquote customizability option. If you want to play a spellcaster that uses a sword, there's a pretty good chance in a skill-based RPG you will find a way to do that. Now, different skill-based RPGs do things in different ways. Some of them will have just skills that you invest in. Some of them will have kind of qualifications aspect things where you can go, well, you know, I'm qualified or I'm trained in these weapons and things like that. And you can get that in various ways. Some of them, like my personal favorite skill-based RPG, probably because I ran a 5.5-year campaign using it, I'm still stuck on Open Legend. I think it is such an amazing RPG, and it's 100% skill-based. There are no classes in it whatsoever. But the way that everything works is you invest in something like might. And might is exactly what it sounds like. It's big bronze stuff. And if you want to be a monk and just punch people in the face, you can go with might. If you want to be a big tanky dude that uses a giant great axe, you also would invest in might. If you want to be a dude that's super slow and just kind of walks around and has a big backpack that he slings over his back and then uses it to kind of bash people in the head with it and protect himself like a shield, you could invest in might. And so by using your skill points to invest in different skills, you would basically kind of write your own character. And it was really important in Open Legend to go into character creation with an idea of what you wanted to do. I guess that's another kind of benefit to class-based RPGs, is you can just kind of follow a character builder and start off not knowing what you want, and at the end come up with something interesting. Whereas skill-based RPGs, you really do need to have an idea of what you want to do when you start building the character. Yeah, so you have really cool options that allow that. Another kind of benefit of skill-based RPGs versus class-based is... wow, brain just went away. That was really fun. Give me a second here. Another benefit of skill-based RPGs is as a designer, you don't need to focus so much on ensuring that there are particular play styles in your game. You know, the real focus as a game designer in a skill-based RPG is you need to focus on providing as many different options as possible that can be mixed and matched. So you don't need to, like in a class-based RPG, if you want to allow players to be able to play a kind of like sword and sorcery style character where they use a sword in one hand and spells in another or something like that, you have to find a way to create a class that combines those two the things, whether it's through a main class, whether it's through a subclass, but you have to do that. For a skill-based RPG, from a design perspective, you really only have to create a magic system and you have to create a weapons system. And if you want to allow that kind of combination of magic sword style character, all you have to do is make sure that those two systems can work together. And that's the biggest thing about skill-based RPGs in general from a design standpoint, is anytime you are creating a skill, and you could call this both a benefit and a hindrance to the game. Every time you're creating a skill, every time you're creating an ability, it needs to be created under the idea that this ability is not being used in a vacuum. It is going to be combined with other abilities. And that does mean that you can create... there's less like really cool epic abilities in a skill-based RPG. And the reason behind that is... the way to do that in a skill-based RPG is you combine 2 or 3 different abilities to make this really cool, epic, world-ending ability. And so from a design perspective, in order to encourage that thing, you intentionally want to create skills that will naturally synergize with another one. A good example of this, Fabula Ultima is technically a class-based RPG. You have multiple classes, and it's kind of built through... multi-classing. However, it shares a lot of game design structure with a skill-based RPG because the classes themselves are not like your traditional classes where at level 1 you get this, at level 2 you get this, at level 3 you get this, where they have a set progression. All the classes in Fabula Ultima are a collection of like 5 or 6 different skills. That as you invest points in them, they get more powerful, but in general, they don't change massively. There are a few caveats to that in the system, where there are a couple skills that the more points you invest, the more weird things it can do. But for the most part, it's a single skill, and it just gets more powerful as you invest more in it. But the skills themselves, so each class is just a small collection of skills. It's how they kind of balance the idea of, well, we don't want too many broken things happening. But every single skill in every single class is designed to synergize with another class in some way, shape, or form. And so... when you're looking at a skill-based RPG, that's one of the things that you really need to focus on. And we'll talk about detriments in just a second here, but to make reference to the obvious one, the paralysis of choice, by creating abilities that naturally synergize with other abilities and finding ways to indicate which abilities synergize together, whether that's through particular word choice. It's one of the reasons why I'm a big stickler on word choice in RPGs, because a really, really simple way to inform your players that this skill is designed to synergize with this skill is by using similar word choice, either in the naming of the skills or the text of the skill itself. And that makes the player feel smarter effectively, because they can go, wait a minute, these two skills work together, but they weren't implicitly told that. Again, it is a way to ensure that the players are playing the game how it is designed to be played. So when you're creating abilities in a skill-based RPG, understand that you are going, these are going to be combined with other abilities, and you should encourage that with your players by going, okay, well, yeah, this ability right here that allows you to attack twice in one turn synergizes really well with this ability. It allows you to light your sword on fire to do additional damage with every attack. See, they synergize super, super well. So those are kind of the big selling points of skill-based RPG, is that customizability aspect, and the idea of kind of encouraging synergy and the things like that. Now, when we go to the downside of skill-based RPG, the biggest one is that paralysis of choice. In a skill-based RPG, even if a lot of these skills or abilities are locked behind levels or some kind of investment in a particular tree or something or you use skill trees in general, you are still presented with a lot more options at level 1 for a skill-based RPG than you will ever find in a class-based RPG. Even an end-of-life, like Pathfinder First Edition, edition, there's a lot of choices you have there. But when you look at something like the Open Legends system, there's a lot more choices there. And there's nothing to guide you like you would have in Pathfinder of, well, I want to play a magic-based class. Where here's all the different magic-based classes. And here's the different hybrid classes that do a little magic and weapons. And these are nature magic ones, and these are divine magic ones, and these are arcane magic ones. All of those things are ways to get rid of that paralysis of choice. And a lot of times in skill-based RPGs, there just really isn't a good way to get rid of that, because the whole purpose of a skill-based RPG is to give you more choices. So that's something that, again, as a game designer, something that's become significantly more popular now with skill-based RPGs is they will have a section where they give examples of skill choices you can make to create traditional classes. Open Legend does it. They have in their core book, they have I think it's like 4 or 5 different pages of just archetype classes. Like, you want to play as samurai, these are the skills that you could invest in, and these are the feats that you could invest in, and these are the perks, and these are the banes and boons that you should focus on. Or if you wanted to play a gunslinger, you could do it this way. Fabula Ultima did the same thing, where they have, again, 4 or 5 pages of just class examples. And every new supplement that they put out, they just include more examples of different classes. It's a good idea. So that's one way to kind of get around that from a class design perspective is, okay, if we want to remove some of the choice, you can have either kits where, and this is something that I think, is it Shadowrun that does this, where it's basically, hey, listen, Shadowrun is, my understanding, because I've never played Shadowrun, it's been a long, long time since I looked at any of the books. My understanding, Shadowrun is effectively skill-based, but they do have kind of suggested quote-unquote classes, like Street Samurai and stuff like that, where if you choose that, it will basically say, okay, if you want to play a Street Samurai, then you automatically are going to choose these particular abilities and skills. So that's a really simple way to get rid of a little of that choice, while at the same, choice paralysis, while at the same time not actually removing that benefit of a skill-based RPG, which is, well, you can actually make any choice that you want. The other kind of really nice benefit of having quote-unquote example classes is, like I said before, one of the big benefits of a class-based RPG is the ability to weight your decisions. And being able to give example classes will allow you to give a little blurb that goes, yeah, if you want to play something where it plays like this and this is the lore behind it, then that will help them to kind of weight that decision and make the right decision in their mind. But because skill-based RPGs are not class-based, most of them can't afford to put the amount of, just dedicate the amount of space on the page to lore that most class-based RPGs are going to. Because, and this is the other really big downside of a skill-based RPG, is instead of having, a class and the mechanics of the class are explained right in the class, and then each one will kind of build on that. With a skill-based RPG, every skill has to have its mechanics explained separately and has to have them kind of defined on their own. Because players can mix and match a bunch of different abilities doesn't mean that they're going to every single time. In fact, a lot of times they're not going to. There may be certain abilities that they don't use in conjunction with anything else. And so every skill has to be designed in a way that it can synergize with other ones, but also has to be designed in a way that it can exist on its own without any synergies whatsoever. Because there are going to be situations where the players, maybe they want to eventually synergize it with something else, but they just don't have the points that they need to, or it's a higher level that they want to be able to synergize it with. And so in order to keep the players from going, well, I have to take this now because later on it will turn into something cool, which is one of the biggest problems with the third edition, was there were so many times it's like, well, I have to take this feat now because in 4 levels, the feat that I want to take requires me to have this one and this other one, despite the fact that I don't care about either of them and I won't be using either of them. I still have to do that. So in order to avoid that in a skill-based RPG, every skill, whether it's base level or something higher, needs to be able to exist on its own in a vacuum without completely ruining it. If for a skill to actually be useful and actually have the players want to use it, it has to be paired up with another one, then there's really no reason for that skill to exist. Just make a skill that has them both paired up. And go from there. So yeah. Wow. Again, brain just completely gone. I ran my game this morning. For me, it's getting very, very late and I should be asleep by now. So my brain's starting to slowly leak out of my ears. So yeah, for the most part, again, skill-based RPGs can be a lot of fun, but they do require you to kind of go into the character creation process with an idea in mind before you start building it. Choice paralysis is a real thing. Synergy abilities are a really, really big thing, and if they're balanced poorly, it's not fun. And when they're balanced really well, it can be incredibly fun, but kind of overwhelming. And then just finding ways to weight people's decisions can be a lot more difficult in a skill-based RPG than it can be in a class-based. So yeah. I'm interested, though, to hear what your guys' the thoughts are. Again, I've played both skill-based and class-based RPGs for a really, really long time. I tended to pretty much exclusively prefer class-based RPGs because, first of all, they were familiar to me, and second of all, they made the most sense to my brain as far as how I built characters. And it wasn't until I started doing Realms of the Wild for Zelda Universe that I really started to understand the kind of pull of skill-based systems. But what do you guys think? Are there benefits to either skill-based RPGs or class-based RPGs that I glossed over or I didn't mention? Are there detriments to either system that I completely ignored? And more importantly, What are your favorite examples of either a skill-based RPG or a class-based RPG, especially if they are not Dungeons and Dragons? Because again, everybody knows what Dungeons and Dragons is. It's a fantastic game, but I'd really love to hear some class-based RPGs that aren't D&D that you guys really, really enjoy, or skill-based RPGs that aren't Open Legend, because nobody knows Open Legend, but it's super awesome and amazing. Or weird hybrid ones. I mean, if you look at something like Vampire the Masquerade, it's technically kind of class-based, but they have a lot of skill-based things where multiple clans will sometimes share power, and depending on how you invest your blood points, I think they are. It's been a long time since I've looked at a Vampire the Masquerade book. You can have kind of similar builds as other Kika clans without having to belong to that clan and things like that. So, yeah, let me know all that stuff in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.